Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge, and welcome to Keeping Relevant. I've known my guest, Jerry Kretchmer, for over 60 years, and I thought it would be interesting to talk to him today from our new point of view, that is, an older person who's not happy, I guess, with what's happening in the world and certainly in this presidential election. So welcome, Jerry. And
thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about it. When I first met you in 1961, you were running for district leader of the Democratic Club in your area.
3rd Assembly District. It was north, south, and middle.
The sad part about it is that I don't think people even know what that is anymore.
Well, let's tell them because it's interesting.
Yeah.
In every neighborhood in the city of New York, there are political machines that actually try to manage the success of the party in the elections, and they also try to provide some limited kinds of public support to people who need it. If you want to know something that you don't know and the club is active. Clubs have 3 ways of existing. A lot of the clubs still have clubhouses. On the west side,
fewer than ever, though.
But fewer than ever, right? But so let's describe how we formed the club in 1960. We started to campaign to win the district leadership. We had a primary, we won the primary, and suddenly we were district leaders. It was no more complicated than that. And we ran and beat somebody from what was called the other guys. And the other guys were old timers who had been around for a long time, and we didn't like what they were doing because they were doing it in ways that nobody knew what they were doing.
Well, they not only were doing it in ways that nobody knew what they were doing, but they were stealing or taking money, and there was no record of it.
Well, there has always been a lot of mischief in politics, a lot of mischief in local politics. We were trying to just diminish some of that mischief.
We were the beginning of the reform movement.
The Committee for Democratic Voters.
Right.
Arnold Fine was the leader.
And Eleanor Roosevelt and Herbert Lehman and all of these prestigious elected officials and persons were supporting it. And we were running against something called Tammany Hall, which was...
Carmine DeSapio.
Carmine DeSapio was the county leader.
Right.
And he made the decisions. They appointed the judges. They assigned the loyal district leaders, not us, because we were the reformers. They assigned the manhole covers to inspect, and then they were paid by Con Edison to do this, which you can imagine what that job was. It was nothing. But in return, they had to come up with a vote in their district. Right?
With a lot of votes in their district.
So now, in a funny way, I mean, we defeated them, and we took over the Democratic Party.
We did.
And in a funny way, though, the Democratic Party has fallen in its responsibility because it now no longer seems to provide the infrastructure that's needed for an active national political party.
But there are 2 separate things here. There's the national party and there's the local party.
Right.
And then there's because the local party has so little strength now, people can get at it and run without having an organization that's political, but an organization that's social or local or anxious or caring or motivated by religion or by faith, by color. And so we've got a very competitive system here. There's the party, and then there's all the people, the far left, the near left, the up left, the down left, the down right, the upright. So the upright. So it's just there is no cohesive Democratic Party at the moment. One of the things is that there's no party leader. I follow politics, what I consider really closely. I can't tell you who was running the national committee now. Who is it? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. 20 years ago.
I know. I do know. It's a man who ran for the Senate in North Carolina or South Carolina.
Right.
He was a very liberal candidate.
Right. Nobody can ever do everything by themselves. So one of the tricks in politics is for you to do good things, gather good people around you, create an organization, and today all kinds of organizations are created inside the organization. And so there's no true leadership. The president is the president, and he appoints all of these important people, but he has no political purpose under the law, but he has a political purpose under the way politics are practiced, and I don't believe they live up to they don't solve their political problems and don't run political organizations.
Well, they run now independently, so we see people like Bobby Kennedy Jr. paying people to go out and get signatures on a petition to force his way through the legal system onto ballot.
People are frightened about illegal elections, and here's a candidate who's running for office to be president of the United States committing an illegal act or an improper, maybe it's not illegal, I take that, but an improper thing. Certainly people have a right to know whose names are on the petition. All the petition gatherers, it said, just said that this was the petition for the very liberal people. And people signed it thinking they were signing who knows what, and they walked away.
It is essentially a two-party system, and it's been challenged periodically by a third party, and it really doesn't work, it seems to me.
Well,
we've never had an election, have we, with a third party candidate?
No, but one of the big problems is you have all these elections where we've lost the election because there was a third party candidate.
Right.
And the most important one is Gore.
Now let's leave the structure and go to the purpose of running. And we both came out of I mean, you're younger than I am, but we came out of the Roosevelt tradition.
That's right.
Here.
Well, you know, when I was born, and so when you were born, the only president you knew till he died, which was 15 years later,
Yeah.
was Roosevelt. And
Yeah.
so it's really, and the power that he had and the fear that we had during the Second World War was all allayed by the fact that Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was the president, and he was going to get us out of this thing.
Well, he took the country out of the Depression,
Right.
which was a very serious depression and a great change. I mean, we grew up with people starving around us and everything. Anyway, we used to listen to him on the radio, and he
That's
was
right.
very elegant.
Because he was a leader. He was,
Yeah.
he was a natural leader, and he was leading things that people could believe in. It was so much simpler then. There was no. One of the things that we have to really remember is that there was no the crowding of the waves now, all the junk that pours out to people that are innuendo or conspiratorial. It was so much harder to communicate when we were growing up and when we first started politics. You communicated by calling people on the telephone who would take the calls because it wasn't robot calls and because they didn't hang up because a human being was at the other end, and so it was sometimes fun to talk to that human being. Sometimes it even turned out to be a neighbor. Now it's all done by machines. It's all of the humanity has been lifted from our politics, and it's all been replaced by machines, by technology.
It's so disruptive. We used to think it was a noble profession and that you ran for office because you wanted to help change the world. You wanted to make it a better place for more people.
We haven't accomplished all the things that we should have accomplished. You know, the air, the water, the heat, whatever you want to talk about was an issue as long ago as when I started, and it's still the same issue. Fair wages, organizations. It's incredible how the political, the ambitions of the people haven't changed, and the political system is even less able to fix it now than it was then.
Who were the outstanding political leaders of your lifetime?
We never knew enough about Jack to know whether he would have been a great president.
But he was glamour.
Yeah, well, he was good for the country because he was exciting, and she was exciting, and they didn't have any bad ideas. So they got us out of this thing with the Russians in Cuba. So he for the 3 short years he was president, he seemed to be a decent president.
There was such excitement about going to Washington for the new frontier.
Totally.
Well, he followed Nixon and Watergate.
Right.
Nixon did some very good things.
Okay, but let's go away from Nixon. The father and the son, they never excited anybody. The two presidents. Bobby, when he ran for the Senate, he ran because he was the first person since his brother who had gathered young people to a cause. That, if you remember, McCarthy was the other candidate. We didn't like McCarthy. We thought he was too much of a one-candidate person. He wasn't appealing to the people that we believed we needed to appeal to. We tried to get Kennedy to run. He decided he was going to run. We went into all those primaries, and then unfortunately, he was killed by some crazy guy in California.
But Bob Kennedy also represented a legend. It was a continuation of the new frontier. It was, he publicly went through the agony of the assassination, which was really interesting. I watched him the other night on a film that I saw with Lyndon Johnson addressing the Congress, and it was shortly after Johnson had become president, and he was sitting in the row sullen. He wouldn't, you know, everybody else was clapping and everything. He didn't move. He was very
well, there was
hurt,
as you know,
angry, bitter.
Yeah, and there was no love lost between the Kennedys and the Johnsons.
Right, but there wasn't any real reason. I mean, there was jealousy and distrust.
Well, that's a big reason. I mean,
Yeah.
You know, Bobby probably thought that Johnson hadn't supported him enough. He got killed in Texas, of all places. I mean, it was just one of those really, really bad things. But when I look back, and I'm going to hear from people about this, I thought that the best president of our time was Johnson, because he did the two most important things: the Voting Act and the Civil Rights Act. Those were real things that he convinced other people in the legislature, and the Senate in particular, to vote for and support. And that was, to me, that's the social and political implications of that are more important than any other single act that any president since has done. Now, if you would ask me how I felt about Johnson the day after Jack was killed, I would have not liked him at all. If you asked me 5 years later, I would have not liked him. But he was a good politician, and he picked up those two ideas, and he worked them through, and he passed the legislation. Now they're trying to tear it all apart. So he was a great president. You can't think of anything.
But he was plagued by the Vietnam War.
But he admitted, after he stopped being a candidate, he admitted that he had been wrong about the war. And if you go to the Johnson Library in Texas, you'll see that the library shows itself in a way that Johnson admits that the war was a wrong thing, that he should have stopped it.
But we were responsible for part of the disrest.
But that was good. That wasn't
In
bad.
each of these cases, it's our people who were the most vocal, complaining. I never know what to call us, because I always consider myself a Roosevelt Democrat and a liberal. But I'm basically not today's liberal. And I guess I'm progressive, and I hate that term. So what do you call yourself, or think of yourself?
I think of myself as being left,
Right.
thinking that all of the things that we've always talked about, like
Right.
wages and unions and all of that stuff, I'm still for them.
Right.
And I think that if just using Israel as an example, you can't mark people as left, right, or center about
Right.
Israel. You have to think about Israel as a problem that you think about.
Right.
It's not a political problem that has to do with our parties or our political system or who's right or who's left. It's a societal problem, because we have to figure out how Jews and Arabs are going to live together, because we can't stand the effect. So I want them to solve the problem. I want them to get rid of Netanyahu. I don't care whether I'm left or right about that, but I want him gone, and I want to see some changes made in the relationship between the Jews and the Arabs, so that we can have an Israel, and they can help everybody else around them, and we can change the Middle East,
Right.
that part of the Middle East. But it's not likely. But that doesn't have anything to do really with what the politics are from the point of view of left to right. It has to do with my politics are with report to what I think a good society is.
Right.
A good society is one in which there's this peace in Israel.
I agree with you. I don't like the, I don't know how you can't say you're just for working people, because
No.
you're essentially not just for working
No, you're
people.
not.
But you're for, I guess we're for everybody. We want,
Well, yeah,
we
but
want a world that has
but
fairness.
But one quick and clear issue: taxes. I'm willing to pay higher taxes. If I make the money, I'm willing to pay higher taxes. I think we have to change the tax system. We have to really pick off some of the stuff at the top. Now that makes me, in some circles, very radical. In other circles, it's what they believe.
And you were a very successful businessman.
Right.
You were a developer. Let's really tell people you were a developer
I was a legislator,
and you owned restaurants.
right? I built buildings, I owned restaurants. And
And you
most
didn't
important, my job
What?
was I was the commissioner for the environment for the city of New York for 3 long years. And I had the best time of my life working, doing that. Because it was really easy. They couldn't politicize what you were trying to do. They could only fight you because it was not good for them or because they didn't believe in it. But all of the arguments that occur over the environment occur actually over money. Don't import gas. The fact that the Times had a story today that said that Biden was losing his control over how much gas he was going to let the gas producers produce. Now there's two flaws there. One flaw is how bad is the stuff for people, and the other is how much money is not going to be made by a group of people who like to make money.
Because they're so greedy. They want to make more and more money.
Well,
What do people do with all the money?
I have no idea.
I mean, why do they hold on to it so? And
Well, because they want to pass it on to their children, and they want to become big donors in places that they want, and they want to spend a lot of money because they want to show that they do have a lot of money, and so they spend their money acquiring
it's
things.
more than that, though. I mean, when you get hundreds of millions of dollars, you can't begin to spend. It's just the accumulation. I mean, it's their mark of success, I guess.
You know, I was brought up in the middle of a depression.
Right.
We didn't have anything.
Right.
You know,
It's a very hard thing.
it's hard to go back and think about the fact that, you know, how we lived or where we lived. I lived in the Bronx in a 1-bedroom apartment till I left law school, and that was it was tough, but it was great. I learned my life from the beginning to the end, including the political piece of it. Every time I've learned something, I've been able to use it in the next thing I want to do. And sometimes they were very successful, and sometimes, as I call them, the misses, I failed. But the society
you did very well.
Yeah, and the society was much more open and freer about people like me.
Why were seemingly more people with empathy and more people interested in cause? I mean, it's hard to see the civil rights movement be recreated today.
It can't be recreated today.
And have we segregated ourselves out into so many special fields?
Yeah, I think there are just, one of the things that's true is there's no single list of things that people can be for. Everybody mixes their lists. You know, I know people who are really very social, very caring about people who don't have enough, very nice to the people who work for them, really good human beings who chafe at some of the stuff that the Democrats want to do. They're really good people want to do things, and they can't do them because the system doesn't want them to do them. And they get frustrated, and they just walk away.
It's so how do we explain today the divisions that we see about almost everything, but really passionate divisions?
Because the communication system, the spread of a message is so easy with TikTok and all the rest of this stuff.
The internet.
The internet. And so when untruths are told, I won't even call them lies, when untruths are told, or a situation is twisted from the truth into not being the truth, and that is passed out over the course of a day to millions and millions and millions of people, enough of those people believe that because it makes them comfortable to believe it.
Were we totally unprepared for the internet when you think about it?
Probably.
I think we were.
Probably.
I think we were naive to not to think of the different uses that it could be put to and the effect it had on people.
I never learned to write in script. When I was going to school, we printed everything. When they tried to teach me script, I laughed. When they tried to teach me to type, I laughed. Boys didn't type. And today, everybody can communicate because everybody can master their telephone. Almost everybody. Everybody under 40 is a whiz on their telephone. We're not such a whiz because our hands move more slowly and we don't think quite quickly. But if you can't, I fight with my children about this. They can't have an argument with me online because I can't type the answer to their comment. They can tell me what they want.
Yeah.
And it upsets me.
But how do we account for somebody like Donald Trump? Crude, arrogant.
He's a salesman.
He's a psychopath, though.
Forget that. He's a psychopathic salesman, if you want to say that. But he's an incredible salesman. He knows how to sell the things that he wants to accomplish. Remember, his whole history is in making people do things that seemingly are not appropriate for them to do and getting away with it.
Yeah, but what he really wanted to do was to make a lot of money, have a good time, right? And be adored or admired. But he's gone beyond that.
He also wanted to be president. He wanted to be president for his whole life.
Do you think he wanted consciously to be president?
Yes.
Or did he want?
Consciously he wanted to be president. And he always thought that he would get to some point where he could become the president. And he did. And he did it by bullying all the people who were candidates at the same time as he was, the Republicans in the primary debates. And then he said things in the primary debates that weren't true, that nobody called him on. And then he ran an election in which he said things that weren't true and nobody called him on. It's fun. It's a lot of fun to be a congressman. You have a lot of perks.
Is it fun to be threatened all the time by, I mean, is it fun to make yourself so apparently, I don't know even the word.
I know what you're saying, but yes, I mean, look at Margie, whatever her name is. She just, to use a Hebrew word or Yiddish word, quells on being at the center of attention for ideas that obviously have no merit, that embarrass her other Republicans, and she doesn't care. She's just interested in how much trouble she can make and how much attention she can call to herself. And we don't have, for some reason, we don't have any Democrats like that. If Trump is elected president, and he's elected president with a majority in the Senate and a majority in the House, I think that this will be a very difficult place for people like you and me to be. It may not hurt us because we're at this point probably above being hurt, but it will bother us so badly.
It'll be terrible for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren.
Yeah, we believe that. But the other side believes that if he's reelected, he'll be incompetent, he'll be unable to function, and it will be bad for their children and their grandchildren. Because that's
I mean, if he's not reelected, the other side.
No, yeah, no, but if he is reelected, we're the other side of that, and we will be equally disturbed. And if
And who do you think there are more of?
It seems it's hard to imagine, but in this broad polling that they're having now, there's certainly more of them than people who are for Trump than there are us.
Other people who don't feel it's important to vote. But people are no longer taking seriously the fact that essentially they are the bosses in the government. They vote where they should vote.
But he's convinced them that if they vote for him, then he's a better boss and he's the best boss for them. And we haven't convinced anybody yet, it seems, that Biden is the best boss and that he's best for them, and that's the trick.
You have the energy to go out and convince people?
Dorothy and I, in the Kennedy election, in the Jack Kennedy election in '60, stood on the corner on 44th Street and Broadway every night for 40 days. I had a flag and a soapbox. I stood on top of it and I talked to the people in the street about why this election was important. And Dorothy walked around with a can, shaking it to get money. And when you think about getting money for the Kennedys, it's a joke. But the point was that we were in this thing, and on those nights, I could stand on the box and I could get people to talk to me about this election and about what was happening. I have no idea how many votes they were changed. I was having a great time, but people were listening to me. There's no one in that person-to-person community anymore.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Kretchmer.